Welcome to Restoria. I'm Jenna, and this is your cozy corner for gentle bedtime stories. Each night, I'll share peaceful tales made to quiet your thoughts and guide you softly into sleep. So settle in, get comfy, and let the story carry you into rest. The story tonight is called The Blanket Fort, Chapter 1. The day the sky said stay in. The sky is the color of stone. Thick clouds stretch across the horizon, layered and low, pressing the light flat against the windows. There's no wind, no rush, just stillness. The kind that makes you pause mid-step and think, maybe I won't go out today. Mara stands in the kitchen with her mug of tea, watching the trees barely move. It's the kind of gray that quiets even the clocks. The tick of the one above the stove sounds softer than usual, as if it, too, is tucking in. She checks her phone. No new messages, no urgent errands. Just a long, slow afternoon waiting to be filled. She thinks about folding laundry, then doesn't. Instead, she walks to the living room, sets her tea down, and starts pulling the couch cushions onto the floor. She doesn't have a plan, just a feeling. Soon, the quilts come out of the linen closet, 2 heavy ones, 1 light, a faded patchwork, one from her childhood. She drapes them over chairs, over the backs of furniture. She uses books to anchor the corners. A nest begins to form. She finds a string of fairy lights in a drawer, slightly tangled but still working. She winds them along the top edge, where the quilt sags just enough to feel like a ceiling. Inside, she layers pillows, the softest ones, a few with mismatched pillowcases. She tucks in a small blanket and sets a thermos of tea beside her. From a shelf, she picks an old book, the one with the worn spine and the pages that smell like rainy weekends. She lights a small candle in a glass jar. The flame flickers, golden and soft, dancing gently against the fabric wall. Outside, the rain begins. It's not dramatic, not a storm, just a steady tapping on the roof and windows. A hush made of water. Mara crawls inside the fort, pulls the blanket over her lap, and opens the book to a familiar chapter. The words settle around her like they know the way. She doesn't read for long, just enough to remember how the story goes. Just enough to feel that soft place inside her begin to ease. Then she closes her eyes and listens to the rain, to the quiet, to the soft crackle of the candle. The smell of wax and old paper blends with the steam from her tea. She shifts slightly, letting the blanket settle around her like an exhale. No notifications, no list of things to be done, just the sound of being inside, wrapped in fabric and warmth, as the world outside slows to match her breath. The light inside the fort glows golden. Shadows dance softly across the quilt walls. She doesn't think about later, doesn't wonder what she'll make for dinner. She just lets herself be here, and for the first time in a long while, Mara doesn't feel behind. She feels held by the blankets, by the flicker of candlelight, by the stillness she rarely lets herself step into, and in that small, quiet space, it's enough. Chapter 2. The world outside can wait. The rain doesn't stop. It continues in soft, steady rhythms, the kind that make time feel slower, softer, stretched out like dough on a floured board. Mara wakes from a short nap inside the fort, unsure how long she's been asleep. The candle's wick has shortened. The tea in her thermos is lukewarm, and the sky outside the blanket walls is no brighter than before. She yawns and stretches, not fully ready to leave her small cocoon. The book rests on her chest, still open to the page where she stopped reading. She flips it shut and places it beside her. Instead of reaching for her phone, she listens. Rain on the roof, rain on the windows, a drop somewhere near the back porch tapping like a slow metronome. She smiles. The house doesn't ask anything of her today. Outside the fort, the rest of the living room waits the half-folded laundry on the armchair, the unanswered emails blinking quietly on her laptop. She doesn't move toward any of it. Instead, she pulls the blanket up to her chin and lies back down, not to sleep, just to be. The fairy lights cast soft dots across the quilt ceiling, like a low constellation made just for her. She thinks of nothing in particular, a recipe she might try tomorrow, a walk she could take when the rain clears, a memory of building blanket forts as a kid and begging to leave them up for just one more night. She lets those thoughts float past. After a while, she reaches for the thermos and takes a sip of what's left. It's not hot, but the sweetness of the tea still feels comforting. The air inside the fort has warmed slightly with her breath. It smells like candle wax and fabric soft and close, like the inside of a memory. She adjusts the pillows under her back, fluffing one that's lost its shape. Everything she needs is within arm's reach. Eventually, she takes out a small notepad from her side table and a pen she keeps nearby. She writes one sentence: "Today is soft," then underlines it. She doesn't need more words. Not today. She rests the notepad beside the book, turns off the fairy lights for a moment, and watches how the candlelight grows larger without them, more golden, more alive. In the quiet, with the hush of rain and a world on pause, Mara feels something loosen inside her, like she's stopped trying to be anything but present. She shifts slightly, tucking her legs to the side. Her fingers trail across the fabric roof, tracing the uneven stitching on one of the old quilts. She remembers when it used to cover her bed in the winter, how it was always just heavy enough to feel like a hug. Outside, a car passes the tires, hissing across the wet road, and disappears just as quickly. The sound seems far away, not just in distance, but in relevance. Nothing from beyond the house feels urgent anymore. She watches a bit of wax pool at the base of the candle. It shifts and glistens like liquid amber. She pulls the blanket tighter and thinks of how rare it is to spend a whole afternoon without needing to explain herself to anyone, without needing to check in or check on. Time doesn't need to move quickly today, and neither does she. For a moment, she pictures herself outside, coat on, umbrella in hand, keys jangling. The idea feels strange, not wrong, just distant, like something meant for another day. She picks up the book again, turns to a random page, and reads a few lines aloud, her voice barely more than a whisper. The words fill the tiny space like steam rising off tea, and when she finishes the paragraph, she doesn't rush to turn the page. She lets the words linger. The world outside can wait. Inside the fort, Mara is exactly where she needs to be. Still, wrapped, safe. Chapter 3, Candlelight and Cocoa. By late afternoon, the rain softens further, still steady, but thinner now, like it's slowly forgetting why it started. Mara's stomach rumbles quietly. She stretches beneath the quilts, feels the pull in her back and shoulders, then crawls out of the fort into the dim room beyond. The light has shifted. What little brightness filters through the windows is blue, tinged and cool. She pads into the kitchen in her socks. The floors cool beneath her feet. The hum of the fridge is the only sound besides the occasional drip from the back porch gutter. Opening the cupboard, she finds a tin of cocoa she hasn't used in ages. She stirs it into a pot of warm milk on the stove, watching the swirls deepen from pale to dark, the scent slowly filling the room. Chocolate, cinnamon, a hint of vanilla. She leans on the counter while it heats, her hands wrapped around the edge of the sink, breathing in the warm air rising from the stovetop. She closes her eyes for a moment, letting the scent settle into her like a memory. She pours the cocoa into a big mug and adds a dash of sea salt on top, the way she always used to when she needed something that felt like care. Back in the living room, the candle inside the fort has burned low. She replaces it with a fresh one. This one smells faintly of clove and lights it with a match struck against the book of matches she keeps in the drawer for power outages. The new flame flutters up, golden and slow. She settles in again, legs crossed, the mug warm in both hands. The cocoa is rich and comforting. She sips slowly. There's no soundtrack, no show playing quietly in the background, just the hush of rain and the soft pop of the candle. Her eyes drift to the book again, then back to the flame. She doesn't need the story today. The fort itself feels like enough of one. The way the quilts bend gently overhead, the familiar softness of a pillow against her back, the smell of chocolate and clove. It's a story told in layers, in pieces, one she didn't plan, one she's glad she's writing anyway. She lets out a long breath and closes her eye. A memory drifts in her as a child, hands sticky from marshmallows, nestled in a fort, not so different from this one. The soft murmur of her mother's voice, reading from a book just out of sight. She opens her eyes again and lets the feeling stay. She takes another sip of cocoa and watches the wax soften around the candle's base. The flame leans slightly to the side, reacting to a breeze that doesn't exist. She adjusts the blanket around her shoulders and tucks one foot under the other, rearranging her little space with the quiet precision of someone who wants to feel fully held. A soft clap of thunder rolls far in the distance, not enough to startle, just enough to deepen the hush. She leans back, looks up at the fabric ceiling above her and whispers, "This is nice." No one hears it, but it doesn't matter. The moment he hears her, the room halted, the candlelight flickers again, the cocoa cools slightly, and Mara, wrapped in softness, thinks of nothing she'd rather be doing. She's not trying to feel productive, not trying to solve anything, just sitting, just sipping, just letting the quiet stretch a little longer. And in this pause, this simple, stitched together moment, she feels full. Chapter 4. The kind of silence that listens. Evening settles in quietly. The rain, once a steady rhythm, becomes intermittent soft drizzles broken by long pauses. The windows fog at their corners. The air cools just enough to make the fort feel even cozier. Mara lights a second candle, this one with a faint scent of rosemary. The flames flicker near each other, casting shadows across the fabric walls like waves. She lies on her side now, head propped on a pillow, blanket pulled loosely over one shoulder. She's not tired exactly, just heavy in a way that feels peaceful. She hasn't spoken aloud in hours, and the quiet doesn't feel empty, it feels full, like the air itself is listening, like even the house has paused to rest. Outside the fort, the room has gone dim. Lamps stay unlit. The only light comes from inside, 2 candle flames, small and steady. She pulls her notebook into her lap and flips through its mostly blank pages. Words come slowly, like breath, rain at the edges, pillow pressed to cheek, fire made of wax and wick. She writes without pressure, no goal, just little truths that feel like they belong here. The kind of quiet she's found today doesn't need to be described, but she writes about it anyway. A third candle waits nearby. She lights it too, not out of need, just to see how the glow expands. The fort brightens slightly. The world outside fades even more. For a moment, Mara closes her eyes and listens to the flicker, to the quiet breath of fabric shifting, to the softest hush of nothing at all. She opens her eyes again and adjusts the blanket over her legs. The candlelight glows along her notebook pages. She continues to write, stillness made visible, blankets as roof, quiet like a soft drum. She lets the pen hover before each new line, letting the words come on their own time. In one corner of the fort, the fairy lights blink gently, as if stretching. She reaches up and tucks a drooping piece of quilt more tightly over a chair back, reinforcing the wall. It feels good to tend to something small. She sets her notebook aside and takes a long, slow breath. The rain has stopped again, or perhaps it's only slowed to a whisper. Either way, she feels cradled by the quiet. The fort doesn't just hold her body, it holds her quietness, her inwardness. She remembers another evening like this years ago, when she stayed up late, reading by flashlight, unwilling to leave the cocoon she'd built. She hadn't known it then, but it had been a kind of ritual, a small, private celebration of solitude. Now, grown and weathered by lists and inboxes and notifications, she realizes what that ritual meant. It meant this is your space. It meant you don't have to be anywhere else. The clock in the hallway ticks softly, but she doesn't check the time. It doesn't matter. Time, tonight, feels like something on her side. She tucks her hands beneath the blanket and listens again. This, she thinks, is the kind of silence that listens back, and she is not alone in it. She is with herself, and right now, that is more than enough. Chapter 5, A Place to Stay Still. Morning comes slowly. The sky is the same soft gray, only a little lighter at the edges. Mara stirs beneath her blankets and stretches her legs before burrowing deeper again, unwilling to give up the warmth she's made. The house is hushed. Even the birds seem to be sleeping in. She eventually rises, not because she must, but because her body asks her to. She boils water for tea and warms a slice of toast with honey. She eats standing up, sock-footed, watching the mist drift just beyond the kitchen window. The fort still stands in the living room, untouched. Its walls are a little slumped in one corner, but the rest holds steady. It looks, somehow, even more inviting today. Mara steps inside again with a sigh. The air inside is cool, but not cold. She brings her tea with her this time, and a new book she hadn't planned to start. She reads for a while, but slowly, one paragraph at a time, letting the words stretch like limbs in the quiet. There's something sacred about this pause, something rare. She puts the book down and closes her eyes, not to sleep, just to rest them. She listens to the ticking of the clock again, the faint creak of the house settling, the occasional drip outside from last night's rain. There is nothing she needs to do, and she realizes as she lies there that sometimes the body doesn't need movement. It needs stillness, not the kind of stillness that that comes from stopping, the kind that comes from letting go. The fort holds her gently. It's no longer a structure made of quilts and books and pillows. It's something else now, a place that listens, a pause wrapped in fabric, a room inside the world that doesn't move. She sits up for a moment, refills her tea, and lights another candle. The scent of vanilla and bergamot curls softly into the space. She watches the flame for a while before adjusting one of the fairy lights that sagged in the night. Outside, the world begins to brighten a little, though not with sun, just with awareness, light enough to see the edges of things. Mara returns to her spot in the fort and pulls the quilt over her lap. She opens her notebook again, writes a single line. I don't have to be anywhere else. She reads it back slowly, twice, then underlines it. A breeze whispers at the window. The house exhales, and she stays still. No push to organize, no pull to reply, just her breath, steady and unhurried. She lets her fingers trail across the quilt stitching. Some parts are frayed, but that only makes it feel more familiar, more earned. She thinks about calling someone, telling them about the fort, about the stillness, but she doesn't. Some things feel better kept for later, or just for herself. Time pulls around her, not racing, not waiting. Later, she peeks out of the fort and considers folding it all away. But the thought doesn't feel quite right. The fort isn't finished. Not yet. So she crawls back inside, nestles deeper into her pillows, and lets the stillness hold her a little longer. She writes a few more lines in her notebook. A place to stay still, a moment with no clock, a home made of soft things. Outside, the day continues, quiet, gentle, undemanding, and inside, Mara stays wrapped in softness, grounded in quiet, in a place made just for her to be still. Chapter 6. When the light changes, it's afternoon now. The grey outside has warmed slightly, not into sunlight, but into something softer, a kind of quiet glow that sits low on the walls and deepens the shadows in the corners of the room. Mara opens one window, just a little. The air that flows in is crisp and smells of wet leaves and chimney smoke. It curls around her face and neck, a gentle invitation to stay aware, stay present. the fort is still intact. She lights the last candle. Its match flares briefly, then quiets, and a soft golden flame replaces it. The scent is one she doesn't recognize, something woodsy and warm, maybe cedar or something close to it. She nestles back inside, pulling the quilt tighter, the weight of it familiar now. This has become more than a pause. It has become a space between things, between outside and in, between what was and what will be. She writes a few more lines. The light has changed. I am still. I am not alone. Then she stops, because the words are enough, because they don't need to explain more. Outside, a few leaves flutter across the patio stones. One lands against the screen door and stays. She watches it for a while, then closes her eyes, letting the candle flicker, letting the light shift, letting this moment be exactly what it is. The quiet in the house has deepened, not heavier, just more sure of itself. Like the rooms have settled into a breath they don't intend to hold. Mara adjusts her pillow and leans into it. The quilt folds gently over her arm. She thinks briefly of the outside world, the errands she left undone, the notifications piling up somewhere. They feel so far away. She imagines what would happen if she left them just a little longer. Nothing urgent, nothing pressing, and she smiles because nothing is breaking, nothing is falling apart. Everything is simply continuing, and so is she, just from here, inside a little room made of softness and glow. It's like lying beneath a tent of stars, quiet ones, stars made of old linens and golden thread. She writes again, light through cloth is a kind of sky, quiet is a kind of comfort. She places the notebook beside her and lets her hands rest over her middle, palms down. The candle flickers again. The air stirs once, just enough to move the edge of a blanket. She hears her own breathing, long, even, present in the fort which has stood quietly all this time, seems to breathe with her. Mara doesn't need anything to change. This hour is enough. This soft light, this small flame, this hush that lets her be. She stays, letting the afternoon drift toward evening without needing to do a thing. When the light changes, it doesn't ask for attention. It simply offers a different kind of peace. And Mara, eyes open, heart steady, accepts it. Chapter 7. Dusk inside the fort. Evening draws its quiet curtain across the windows. The sky fades from pale grey to something duskier, blue with shadows, purple at the corners. The world outside dims softly, with no hurry. Streetlights blink on one by one out in the distance. Inside the fort, Mara watches the candlelight deepen. The flickering flames seem steadier now. Their light reflects off the quilt walls like old lamplight in a storybook. She pulls the quilt around her shoulders, sits upright, and sips from her mug of warmed tea, the last of it, still sweet. She hasn't turned on a single overhead light. She hasn't needed to. The glow of the fort, the softness of the room, they've done everything light is supposed to do, and something more. The warmth of it isn't just in temperature, it's in tone, it's in color, it's in how still she feels. She picks up her book again, not to read from the beginning, but to flip to a middle chapter she remembers. The one with a scene she's always loved, something about rain and a kitchen, someone baking bread while the world stays hushed. She reads that part slowly. The words feel round, familiar, kind. Outside, a breeze rustles through the half-open window. She listens to it pass, then hears nothing for a while, only quiet, honest and full. She puts the book down on a folded pillow beside her and stretches her legs out under the blanket. The sky continues to shift, not dramatically, just gently. The kind of dark that feels slow and thoughtful. She lights one last candle. It's shorter than the others and melts quickly, but the glow it casts is golden and low. She watches the flame for a while, letting her breath match its rhythm. There's no rush now. No more lists whispering in the corners of her mind. The quilt fort doesn't care about time. She picks up her notebook again and writes. This place isn't about escape. It's about returning. She underlines that word twice. Returning, and lets her hand fall still. The shadows on the walls stretch longer. Outside, someone in the neighborhood walks past, shoes soft against the damp pavement. Their footsteps fade quickly, swallowed by the dusk. Mara listens until even the air feels quiet again. She leans back. She lets the dusk settle. She lets the night arrive on its own. And inside the fort, she simply rests in light, in quiet, in the shape of a space made only to hold her. The glow reflects in her eyes as she looks up at the fabric roof. She thinks about how easy it would be to stay here all night, how safe it feels, and for the first time today, she doesn't just feel like she's taking a break. She feels at home. Chapter 8. The Fort in the Morning. The sky is pale again. Morning arrives gently, with no fanfare, just a soft light pressing in at the edges of the fabric walls. Mara opens her eyes slowly, the quiet still wrapped around her like a blanket that hasn't slipped. She stretches inside the fort, careful not to disturb the structure too much. One of the candles has burned itself out completely. The others are just pools of wax now, their warmth stored in the air. She doesn't rush to get up. Instead, she watches the light shift on the fabric, a slow golden hue climbing across quilt seams and into the folds of the ceiling. She lies there, thinking about nothing, about everything, mostly about how simple it all was. A few pillows, some blankets, time she didn't feel, time she simply let be. She eventually crawls out the fort, sighing around her as it settles. The house is still. The window is still cracked open, letting in morning air that smells of damp leaves and something green. She makes tea again, the same way, the same cup. When she returns to the fort, she doesn't go back in. She just sits beside it. She runs her fingers along the edge of one blanket and smiles. There will be a time to put it away. Fold the quilts, return the pillows, move on, but not just yet. The fabric still holds the warmth of last night. The air inside the fort still carries the faint scent of rosemary and candle wax, a kind of softness that feels like memory before it fades. She leans against the arm of the couch and looks around the room. Everything feels familiar and new all at once. There's a bowl on the table from yesterday's toast, a book still resting open where she left it, the quiet hum of the fridge from the kitchen. She could start tidying. She could begin to make the house look like it did before, but the quiet inside her asks her not to rush. She opens her notebook one last time and writes, "Stillness makes room." She pauses, then adds, "For breath, for noticing, for coming home to yourself." She underlines the last part gently, then she closes it and sets it beside the 4. A few birds call outside, their song distant and morning soft. She listens until they fade, then sits in stillness again, cradling the last sips of her tea. And as the light spills further into the room, Mara sits quietly, the morning unfolding around her, the fort behind her, and the quiet still carried within.